Hey, it's Brian Mertens, and I'm going to talk about how to get started in nature studies. And I want to explain a little bit of why it is that so many people these days struggle with feelings of separation from the natural world and why it actually has such positive effects on your lifestyle and feels really, really good when you take some time to get outside and start looking at nature with new awareness. So, one of the things that happens to a lot of people when they first start thinking about getting outside and being someone who's tuned into nature on a deeper level, maybe you don't know where to start. Maybe you don't know anything about the different types of plants and birds or how any of that works. You have this desire to know. But for whatever reason, you didn't grow up in an environment where you were exposed to that kind of knowledge, like how to read the forest and get closer to wildlife and have this deeper sense of belonging in a place. And, in a lot of cases, you might even be the only person in your circle of people who has an interest in learning this stuff. So there's no support from others to help you reach your goals. And, a big part of this just comes from where our modernized culture is at in the world right now. We live in an electronic society that really doesn't do a very good job of educating our children in how to be connected to nature. And then when you grow up without that knowledge, the cycle continues because you've now lost the ability to pass it on. So we have to break that cycle because knowing nature on a deep level actually has tremendous value for our world. And just doing some basic, easy, fun, practical nature studies really teaches you how to care for our environment and have empathy for the living things in our world and how we can culturally engineer a human habitat that supports positive, healthy experiences for all people on this planet. So, if I were to give you some practical suggestions for how to get started in nature studies, I would tell you first that you don't need to become a walking encyclopedia. You don't need to be a geek and carry around a magnifying glass or start an epic insect collection, because knowing nature on a deep level is actually just a basic human skill that comes from using your mind and your five senses to be more aware of what's happening in your surroundings. And the biggest tip that I can probably suggest for starters, if you really are completely new to observing nature, you really want to focus first on expanding your awareness, because awareness is like the master key to knowing how nature works on a deeper level. So a good question to start asking yourself is like, what are some things that you can pay attention to that will immediately start to build a deeper awareness? And one of the big edges for almost everyone I talk to is, how are you using your five senses? How well are you using your eyes and your ears and even your nose or sense of touch to observe the world around you? And honestly, if I were to give you the simplest recipe for how you can go out and get started today, I would tell you to just go outside and use your five senses to consciously focus on nature. Go to a park or go to the beach or your garden in the backyard and use your eyes to look at everything. Use your ears and listen to everything. Use your nose and smell the things around you, and use your hands to feel the ground and touch things. And what this does is it immediately expands your awareness to give you a higher quality experience. And, it doesn't matter if you've never read a single nature book in your entire life or if you avoided museums when you were a kid. It really doesn't matter, because now already you're experiencing nature on a deeper level. Now, another thing that you can do is to start looking at nature through the perspective of different layers, right? So a lot of people will go outside, and because they have an interest in plants, they get focus locked on plants and they ignore everything else that's happening around them. So, it's good to have interests and passions because it gets you out the door and it keeps you motivated. But once you get out there, I think you'll find that you absorb it all much more quickly when you try to observe nature from multiple different layers and perspectives, right? So take a few minutes to ask yourself some big picture awareness questions, like what's happening with the plants? What's happening with the birds? Are there any mammals or other wildlife here? What's happening with the weather? How is the water flowing through this landscape? What's happening with the seasons? And how are all these things connected together? Right? And each of these questions points your focus in a different direction. So you start to build a better understanding of how nature works as a system. And what you'll find is that when you approach nature from this multidimensional perspective, you'll actually learn it much more quickly because you're now tracking the landscape for meaningful connections and relationships rather than simply trying to identify what you see around you on a basic level. And this is really what will start to build that sense of genuine understanding and confident feeling that says, yes, I really know this place. I belong in this place. And when you combine sensory awareness with taking the time to observe all the different layers of nature, it's really a bulletproof system for starting your journey towards being a total nature whiz in a very short period of time. So, I'm Brian Mertens, and those are just a couple of my favorite tips for beginners of nature study. Let me know what you think, and if you want to learn more about how to get started in your nature studies, go check out my website at naturementor.com, and I'll talk to you soon.